Picture this. Inside a worn-out van on a quiet Crenshaw street sits Sly Stone, a man who once ruled stages, now recording music in the dark, dependent on strangers for a meal. This isn't fiction. This is the same genius who electrified Woodstock, who partied with Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Wonder and redefined music forever. How does someone go from a Beverly Hills mansion to a van parked on the edge of survival? That question alone should stop you cold, because this isn't just a story about fame. It's about what happens after the spotlight fades. It's about choices, consequences, and the brutal silence that follows greatness. And once you step into this story, you'll realize something unsettling. The fall of Sly Stone isn't just tragic, it's unforgettable. Sly Stone was born on March 15, 1943 in Denton, Texas, the second of 5 children in a family that moved to Vallejo, California when he was still an infant. His family was rooted in the Pentecostal Church of God in Christ, and music was there from the very beginning. By the time he was 9 years old, he had already appeared on a gospel recording with his siblings under the name the Stewart Four. By the time he was a teenager, he could play guitar, bass, keyboards, and drums. Not adequately, but brilliantly. All 4, simultaneously proficient, simultaneously his. He got a job as a DJ at KSOL, a San Francisco R&B radio station, and it was there that he gave himself the name the world would eventually know. Sly was strategic, slick. Stone was solid. He played Beatles and Rolling Stones records alongside soul and R&B on a station whose listeners did not always understand the choices, but he played what he heard and trusted what he felt. He was not interested in categories. He was interested in music, and to him, music did not have a color. In 1966, he and his brother Freddie Stone merged their respective bands into something that had never quite existed before, a racially integrated, gender-diverse ensemble that was equal parts rock band and soul group and political statement and party. Sly and the Family Stone included black members and white members, male and female musicians, not just singers but players. It was the first prominent group in American music to be fully integrated in both race and gender. And in 1967, they hit with Dance to the Music, and the world stopped to listen. What followed between 1967 and 1971 was a run of music so original, so joyful, so politically alive that it rewrote the rules of what American popular music could be. Everyday people, hot fun in the summertime, thank you for letting me be myself again, family affair, stand. Their performance at Woodstock in August 1969 was one of the defining moments of the entire festival, an early morning set that electrified a crowd of 400,000 people and cemented the group as one of the most important bands in the world. Questlove, the Grammy and Oscar-winning director who later made a documentary about Sly's life, described it plainly. He said Sly Stone created the alphabet that everyone in music is still using to express themselves. He invented bedroom multi-track recording before anyone had a name for it. He used the wah-wah pedal, the drum machine, layered his own vocals over themselves. Prince and Stevie Wonder are celebrated for these techniques, but Sly was the prototype. Every hip-hop producer who ever sampled a break owes something to this man. The Sly and the Family Stone catalog has been sampled over 1,000 times. 1,000 documented times. That is the height. Now comes the fall. It was cocaine first, then PCP, the street drug known as angel dust. The two together created a paranoia and an unpredictability that made Sly Stone increasingly impossible to rely on. By 1970, the group had canceled 26 of their 80 scheduled concert dates. A make-good show at Chicago's Grand Park that summer, the 4th rescheduled date, was canceled yet again, and the crowd rioted. Police and concertgoers clashed in the streets of Chicago because Sly Stone did not show up. Not because he did not want to, because the drugs had made showing up something he could no longer guarantee. He married his girlfriend Kathy Silva at Madison Square Garden in New York City in 1974, turning the ceremony into a public event. She filed for divorce within 6 months, accusing him of drug abuse and violence. The marriage that had been a spectacle became a symbol of the chaos that was swallowing everything he had built. The group formally disbanded in 1975. Sly continued recording sporadically as a solo artist through the late 1970s and early 1980s, but the album sold poorly and the performances were erratic. The man who had once been one of the most exciting live acts in the world had become someone nobody could book with any confidence, because nobody could be sure he would actually appear. He was arrested for cocaine possession in 1983. He spent 6 months in rehab. A nurse at the facility tipped him off about upcoming urine tests so he could flush his system in time. He passed every test. The drugs continued. The 1980s dissolved into the 1990s, and Sly Stone became something rare in the music industry. Not a fallen star, but an absent one. Not someone who had flamed out publicly, but someone who had simply removed himself from the world's view so completely that most people stopped expecting him to return. When Sly and the family Stone were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1993, attendees wondered whether he would even show up. He arrived at the podium more than 10 minutes late, after every other bandmate had already delivered their acceptance speech. He accepted the honor in his own time, on his own terms, which was the only way he had ever done anything. A landlord in Beverly Hills later told a reporter that Sly had rented a mansion in 1993 and left it in a condition that defied description. Bathrooms smeared with gold paint, marble floors blackened by fire or neglect, windows broken, and Sly himself emerging from a guest house to say, in response to the landlord's presence, "You are spying on me." The paranoia that cocaine and PCP can carve permanently into a person's neurological architecture had taken up residence in Sly Stone's mind and would not leave. He attempted small comebacks in the 1980s and again in the early 2000s. In 2006, he appeared on stage at the Grammy Awards for a tribute to the group's legacy, his first public performance in 19 years. He sat at a keyboard with a cast on his hand and sang a few lines that the audience could barely hear. He left before the tribute was finished. That was the last time most people saw him perform. By 2009, the financial collapse was complete. He had sold his music publishing rights to Michael Jackson in 1984 for a reported $1 million, at a moment when the catalog was worth many times that amount and would eventually be worth many times more. In 1989, he had signed a contract with his manager Jerry Goldstein that gave Goldstein control of his royalty income in exchange for a weekly check. For 2 decades, Sly alleged, the royalties flowed into Goldstein's hands, and the checks flowing back to him were far smaller than they should have been. He sued Goldstein for $50 million, alleging fraud that had spanned 20 years. After the royalty dispute destroyed his finances, he moved into a rented house in Napa Valley on money from a 2007 European tour. When the money ran out, he moved into cheap hotels. When the hotels became unaffordable, he moved into his white camper van and parked it on a residential street in Crenshaw. When a reporter from the New York Post found him there in 2011, Sly Stone was 68 years old. The van was stamped on its side with the words, "Pleasure Way," an accidental cruelty that nobody had arranged but that nonetheless felt like a comment from the universe. He told the reporter he liked his small camper. He said he did not want to return to a fixed home. He said he could not stand being in one place. He said he must keep moving. And he said something else. He said, "Please tell everybody, please, to give me a job. Play my music. I'm tired of all this." The decade that followed was one of intermittent visibility and continuing decline. He was briefly hospitalized in 2011 for heart problems during a court arraignment related to a cocaine possession charge. His daughter, Fun Stone, spent some of her father's darkest years literally keeping drug dealers away from his door, confronting them directly. "You got a dad too. That's my dad. You're killing him. Stop, or it's gonna be bad." The fact that his children had to do this, the fact that it had come to that. In 2019, doctors told Sly, not for the first time, that if he did not stop smoking, he was setting himself up for death. This time, something was different. He later described the decision with characteristic simplicity. "Once I decided," he said, "it just happened." He achieved sobriety in 2019 after multiple hospitalizations, after years of his body absorbing the punishment of decisions made in a different time, under the weight of a different kind of pressure. He had not been young in a long time, and the drugs had taken decades that no amount of sobriety could return. In October 2023, he published his memoir,
titled "Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself Again," the name of his 1970 #1 single turned into a document of his own survival. He wrote about the drugs with the clarity of someone who had finally gotten far enough from them to see what they had actually cost. "I knew what needed to happen," he wrote. "It wasn't that I didn't like the drugs. I just decided to quit, and I did. And then, I should have stopped sooner. Much sooner. Less dust and powder, fewer rocks and pipes. Enough days given back that might have added up to years."
In 2025, Questlove released a documentary called Sly Lives: The Burden of Black Genius, examining not just Sly's fall, but the systemic pressures on Black artists at the height of their genius. The film premiered at Sundance and arrived on Hulu. By the time it was released, Sly Stone was too frail to do new interviews. His motor functions had deteriorated. He could not speak in full sentences. His mental clarity was still intact, but the body that had once commanded stadiums could no longer carry him to a camera. The life and death of Sly Stone reflect a rare mix of brilliance, struggle, and unflinching honesty. His passing at 82 closes a chapter on one of music's most transformative figures, yet his influence remains deeply embedded in modern sound. What stands out most is not just his innovation, but his acceptance of the life he lived, without regret or revision. That quiet defiance carries weight. Despite the damage caused by years of excess and illness, there is dignity in his refusal to rewrite his past. His late-life sobriety and reflection reveal a man who understood both his impact and his mistakes. The unfinished screenplay feels symbolic, a story still echoing beyond his lifetime. In the end, his simple admission, "Life has not always been easy," captures everything: the genius, the chaos, and the cost of living entirely on one's own terms.